Most people see a penny and think it is just 1 cent, almost worthless, tossed aside or forgotten in a jar. But what if I told you that some wheat pennies are worth thousands of dollars and could change your entire view of collecting coins? These tiny copper treasures were minted decades ago, some during world wars, some during times of change in American history, and a few of them came out with mistakes so rare that collectors will pay a fortune to own them. Today, we are uncovering the top 10 rare wheat pennies. Imagine holding in your hand a small piece of copper struck in the year 1950, a year that followed one of the most defining decades in American history, a coin that may look simple at first glance yet carries with it a story of resilience, artistry, and economic transition that speaks not only to collectors, but to anyone who wants to understand the United States through its money. The wheat penny of 1950, not just a coin, it is a historical artifact that bridges the wartime era of the 1940s with the post-war boom of the 1950s, and in this journey, we are going to peel back its layers, explore its origins, uncover the role of the United States Mint, and travel through the cultural, financial, and political landscapes that influenced its creation, circulation, and survival. Begin the history of the wheat penny series, officially known as the Lincoln cent wheat reverse, dates back to 1909, when President Theodore Roosevelt pushed for a redesign of American coinage to capture more artistry and meaning in everyday money. The United States Mint enlisted sculptor Victor David Brenner, who created a design that would become iconic, the obverse with the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, the first real person ever to appear on a regular issue U.S. coin, and the reverse with two simple wheat stalks framing the denomination, and the word 1 cent. The wheat ears symbolize prosperity, growth, and the hard-working agricultural roots of America. This design lasted until 1958, which makes the 1950 penny a coin firmly within that legacy. The year 1950 was a fascinating time for coinage production. America was emerging from the Second World War, and the economy was transitioning from wartime manufacturing to consumer-driven growth. This economic boom increased demand for coinage as millions of Americans entered the workforce, bought goods, and circulated currency. The United States Mint produced the 1950 wheat penny in 3 different facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Each mint mark or lack thereof tells its own story. Philadelphia struck coins without a mint mark. Denver coins were marked with a D, and San Francisco coins carried the S mint mark. These subtle differences give collectors today the opportunity to trace a coin's origins and to appreciate the geographic spread of minting operations across the nation. The Philadelphia Mint produced the largest share of 1950 wheat pennies, numbering in the hundreds of millions, reflecting its central role as the primary coin-producing facility. However, both Denver and San Francisco issues are of particular interest to collectors since their mintages were lower, though still large enough to ensure widespread circulation. But rarity in numismatics is not always about the absolute numbers. Rather, it is about how many coins survive in high grades of preservation. And this is where the 1950 wheat penny takes on additional significance. A coin was heavy in the early 1950s. People did not treat these coins as collectibles but as everyday money. Cents were handed over in grocery stores, diners, movie theaters, and gas stations. They wore down quickly with years of pocket use, which is why finding a 1950 wheat penny in pristine, uncirculated condition is far more challenging than finding a circulated example. Mint state coins with original luster, especially those with full strike details on Lincoln's hair and beard, are prized among collectors today. The condition of a coin is graded on a scale ranging from poor to mint state, with proof-like designations for exceptional strikes, and the 1950 wheat penny can be found across this spectrum. But at the very highest grades, they become far scarcer and more valuable. You also must consider the cultural symbolism of the coin. In 1950, America was entering the Cold War era. The country was reshaping its global identity, and at home people were beginning to experience the economic boom that would define the decade. Yet through all this change, the Lincoln cent with its wheat reverse remained a constant presence in every American's pocket. It served as a reminder of Lincoln's leadership and legacy, and the wheat stalks served as a quiet emblem of agricultural roots. Even as Cities grew, suburbs expanded, and technology advanced. The wheat penny was a simple copper coin, but its presence in daily life tied generations together. From a metallurgical perspective, the 1950 wheat penny continued the copper alloy standard that had been restored after the wartime steel cents of 1943. The composition was 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, a formula that gave the coin its distinctive reddish hue when new, though over time exposure to circulation and the elements could tone the coin brown or even darken it completely. Collectors' prize coins that retain their original red mint luster, since these are far less common after more than 70 years. The proof versions of the 1950 wheat penny also deserve mention. Though proof production was not as extensive as modern standards, the Philadelphia Mint issued limited numbers of specially struck proof coins intended for collectors. These proofs were struck multiple times on polished planchets, resulting in sharp details and mirrored surfaces compared to regular circulation strikes today. Surviving proof 1950 wheat pennies are highly collectible and significantly more valuable than their regular issue counterparts. As we explore the journey of the 1950 wheat penny from minting to circulation and into the hands of collectors, we see how this coin represents not just a piece of money, but a slice of American life. It is a window into the era, its economy, its artistry, its values, and its aspirations. And when a collector holds one today, whether circulated and worn smooth by countless hands, or gleaming as it did fresh from the press, it is a chance to connect directly with the year 1950. So when we talk about the 1950 wheat penny, we are not simply talking about a cent, we are talking about the legacy of the Lincoln Cent series, about how coins mirror the society that makes them, about the artistry of Victor David Brenner, whose design endured for half a century, and about the countless Americans whose lives intersected with this coin in their daily routines. It is a humble coin, but one that carries within it the grand story of a nation in transition from the hardships of war into the optimism of the 1950s. And that is why this little piece of copper remains so captivating. Imagine holding in your hand a coin that marks both an ending and a beginning, a coin that carries the weight of decades of American history, while at the same time closing the chapter on one of the most iconic designs ever struck by the United States Mint. The 1958 wheat penny represents the final year of production for the beloved Lincoln wheat cent, a design that had been in circulation since 1909 and had become a cornerstone of American coinage. When people see the 1958 wheat penny, they often underestimate its importance because they see it as just another 1-cent piece. Yet the reality is, this coin symbolizes the end of an era, the closing of nearly half a century of artistry, patriotism, and cultural heritage. Minted during a time when the United States was emerging from the shadow of World War II and standing tall in the midst of the Cold War, the 1958 penny was the last to carry the classic wheat ears on its reverse, a design by Victor David Brenner that had remained essentially unchanged since the days of President Theodore Roosevelt, who had first championed the beautification of American coinage. This coin is more than copper. It is a snapshot of the 1950s, a decade marked by prosperity, booming suburbs, the rise of television, and a society on the brink of major social change. When we dive into the history of the 1958 wheat penny, we find stories that go beyond numismatics. We are talking about the artistry of Brenner, who immortalized Abraham Lincoln on the obverse with such dignity and realism that his design has survived to this very day. We are looking at the minting process of the late 1950s, when the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint produced these final wheat cents in massive quantities. Over 250 million struck in Philadelphia alone, and more than 800 million in Denver. Yet despite those staggering numbers, the significance of this issue has ensured its enduring popularity among collectors to this day. It is a coin that may be common in terms of mintage, but priceless in terms of historical value. The 1958 wheat penny is also surrounded by fascinating stories about the transition to the Lincoln Memorial reverse in 1959, decision made to honor the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. This transition would mark the first major change in the design of the Lincoln cent in 50 years, making 1958 the last true wheat penny. Collectors often look at it as a bookend, a final page in a long and treasured series that began with the 1909 VD cents and carried through decades of American life, through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and the rise of modern America. Beyond its broad history, there are details about the metal composition of the 1958 wheat penny, which was struck primarily in a bronze alloy of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, making it heavier, richer, and more durable than the later copper-plated zinc cents we use today. There are stories of the countless everyday Americans who used these coins to buy candy, pay for streetcar rides, or drop into piggy banks, never imagining that one day people would study and collect them with such passion. In the world of errors and varieties, the 1958 wheat penny carries with it one of the most legendary rarities ever known, the 1958 double-die obverse penny, a coin so scarce that only a handful are known to exist, and each one is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. This error, which shows strong doubling on the inscriptions, like "Liberty and in God we trust," has fascinated collectors for decades and has elevated the 1958 wheat penny from being just a common cent to being the centerpiece of one of the greatest numismatic mysteries. To truly appreciate the 1958 wheat penny, we must also understand the cultural and historical backdrop of its time. In 1958, America was experiencing rapid change. The space race had begun with the launch of Sputnik just the year before, and the United States was racing to catch up. Television was shaping the way families consumed entertainment. Elvis Presley was at the height of his fame, and civil rights movements were gaining momentum. Against this backdrop, the penny remained a humble companion in the pockets of millions of Americans, its value symbolic of thrift, work ethic, and the spirit of saving something small that collectively built into something significantous. We go deeper into this history, we can trace the legacy of the wheat penny from its birth in 1909, when it honored Abraham Lincoln as the first historical figure to ever appear on a United States coin, through the decades of change and challenge that America endured all the way to its farewell issue in 1958. This farewell was not only the end of a design, but the end of a tradition that had connected generations of Americans across nearly half a century of shared history. So, the 1958 wheat penny is not just a coin. It is the closing line of one of the greatest chapters in United States numismatic history. It is a symbol of the nation in transition. It is a reminder of the artistry of Victor David Brenner. It is a link to the stories of ordinary Americans and extraordinary collectors. It is a coin that deserves to be studied, celebrated, and preserved for the generations yet to come. Chatgap said, "Imagine holding in your hand a small piece of American history, a coin that was struck over 70 years ago, a coin that passed through the hands of hardworking men and women in post-war America, a coin that carried the weight of history while still being used to buy bread, milk, or even a newspaper." The 1952 wheat penny is one of those coins. It is not just a simple copper cent, but a reflection of an era marked by recovery from World War II, the growth of the American economy, and the daily life of millions of people. When we look at the 1952 wheat penny, we are looking at a coin that was produced by the United States Mint during a time of transition in both technology and society, and every detail of this coin, from the image of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse to the iconic wheat stalks on the reverse, has a story to tell, and today, we will unfold that story in its entirety, from its design, to its minting, to its role in circulation, and finally to its value and collectability. In the modern numismatic world, the 1952 wheat penny was struck at 3 different mints: the Philadelphia Mint, which produced the largest number, the Denver Mint, which also contributed a significant share, and the San Francisco Mint, which by that time was nearing the end of its production of cents before focusing on proof coins altogether. Understanding the mintage numbers is essential because it allows collectors to gauge rarity and demand. In 1952, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 1 billion pennies, while Denver struck over 400 million, and San Francisco contributed around 180 million. The large mintages might suggest that the coin is common. The truth lies in the details, since quality of strike, condition and mint errors all play a role in what makes a 1952 wheat penny truly valuable. The obverse design of the 1952 wheat penny features the bust of Abraham Lincoln facing right, designed by Victor David Brenner, and first issued in 1909. To commemorate the centennial of Lincoln's birth, Brenner's design was revolutionary at the time, because it marked the first time a real historical figure appeared on a regular issue United States coin. Lincoln was chosen not only because of his legacy as the great emancipator, but also because he symbolized honesty, unity, and strength in a nation still healing from division. The inscriptions on the obverse include "In God We Trust" at the top, "Liberty" to the left of Lincoln, and the year 1952 to the right of his portrait. Beneath the date, one can find the mint mark if the coin was struck at Denver or San Francisco. The absence of a mint mark indicates Philadelphia. The reverse of the coin is just as iconic, with two wheat stalks curved along the sides framing the inscriptions 1 cent, United States of America, and E pluribus unum. The wheat design, also created by Brenner, symbolized prosperity and agricultural strength, and gave rise to the popular nickname wheat penny, which collectors still use today. This reverse was used from 1909 until 1958, after which it was replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse in 1959, marking the end of an era for United States coinage. But beyond design and mintage, the historical context of 1952 makes this coin fascinating to study. America in 1952 was experiencing a post-war economic boom. Soldiers returning from the Korean War were reintegrating into society. Suburban life was expanding with new housing developments. Automobiles and televisions were becoming symbols of prosperity, and the average penny, like the 1952 wheat cent, was a part of everyday commerce. Its presence in candy shops, diners, and gas stations tied it directly to the culture of the time. Condition is everything when it comes to value, and the 1952 wheat penny is no exception. While circulated examples are common and worth only a few cents, collectors prize uncirculated and high-grade specimens. Coins graded Ms. 65 or higher, especially with full red coloration, can command significant premiums at auctions. Coins with brilliant luster, strong strike, and minimal marks are always in demand, and the difference between a brown coin and a red coin in terms of value can be dramatic. Mint state red coins from 1952 are much scarcer than circulated brown coins, and as a result they often sell for hundreds of dollars. Another area of interest for collectors is mint errors. The 1952 wheat penny has its share of striking errors, doubled dies, off-center strikes, and repunched mint marks among them. The 1952D repunched mint mark is particularly well known, and collectors actively seek out examples of it because it highlights the imperfections in the minting process during that era. These mint errors add uniqueness and rarity to a coin that otherwise might be considered common. The San Francisco mint issues of 1952 also hold special significance because they were among the last wheat cent struck at San Francisco for circulation before the facility shifted toward proof coinage. Many collectors today value 195 to South wheat pennies not just for their mintage numbers, but because they symbolize the end of an era for the San Francisco Mint. When we trace the journey of a 1952 wheat penny from its creation at the mint, to its role in everyday commerce, to its survival in collections today, we see more than just a copper coin. We see a historical document struck in metal. Each 1952 penny that survives, whether worn smooth from decades of circulation or shining brightly in uncirculated condition, represents the passage of time, the changing of hands, and the enduring legacy of American coinage. For the numismatist, every small detail tells a bigger story, from the metal composition of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, to the slight variations in mint mark placement or die polishing lines. In conclusion, the 1952 wheat penny is more than just another cent. It is a coin that connects us to mid-20th century America, a coin that speaks of prosperity, growth, and the everyday lives of millions of people. While collectors may value it for rarity, condition, or errors, its true worth lies in the history it represents, and in the countless untold stories it has silently carried through time. So the next time you come across a 1952 wheat penny, remember that you are not just holding a piece of copper, you are holding a living relic of American history, waiting to be studied, admired, and passed on to future generations. Imagine holding in your hand a small piece of American history, a coin so common yet so powerful in its story that it bridges the gap between generations and carries within it the mark of an era that shaped the modern United States. The 1957 wheat penny may look like just another copper cent, but when you begin to dig deeper into its past, its production, its symbolism, and its journey across countless hands, you discover that it is not simply a coin, but rather a key to understanding mid-20th century America. To captivate your imagination, let us step back into the year 1957, time when America was in the midst of transformation. Dwight D. Eisenhower was serving as president. The interstate highway system was expanding. Televisions were becoming fixtures in households across the nation, and the Cold War was shaping politics, industry, and daily life. Against this backdrop, the United States Mint continued to produce the iconic Lincoln wheat penny coin, first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. The wheat penny series was already beloved by the American public, but by 1957, the end of the design was just around the corner, making every cent from these final years part of a closing chapter in numismatic history. The 1957 wheat penny was struck at two mints: the Philadelphia Mint, which produced coins without a mint mark, and the Denver Mint, which carried the small d mint mark on the reverse. Together, they minted hundreds of millions of coins. But while the numbers may sound massive, each cent played a role in the economy of a nation booming with post-war optimism. Copper was the core metal used in its composition, consisting of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, a mixture that had been standard for the wheat penny for decades, though slight variations had occurred during World War II, when the mint temporarily experimented with steel cents because of wartime needs. By 1957, however, the coin had returned firmly to its classic copper form, giving it that distinctive reddish-brown glow when newly minted. The obverse of the coin featured the timeless portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner in 1909, design so powerful and enduring that it still graces the penny today. Over a century later, Lincoln's bust faces right with the word Liberty stamped to the left, and the motto "In God We Trust" arched above his head. The date, 1957, sits just to the right, making it clear to collectors exactly when the coin was struck. Each detail of the portrait carried symbolic weight. Lincoln himself represented unity, leadership, and freedom, the very ideals that Americans held onto during the uncertain climate of the 1950 sun. The reverse, two simple yet elegant wheat stalks framed the words 1 cent and United States of America, flanked by the motto Pluribus Unum, from many one. This reverse design gave the coin its famous name, wheat penny or wheat cent, and it was this reverse that was on its way out by 1959, when the coin would be redesigned with the Lincoln Memorial. The 1957 issue therefore stands as one of the last times the wheat design would circulate widely, which adds a historical significance that cannot be overlooked when studying the 1957 wheat penny from a collector's perspective. Its value lies not just in rarity, but in condition. Millions of these coins still exist, but finding one in pristine, uncirculated form with sharp details and bright luster can command a premium, especially with certified grading from professional services. A circulated penny might only fetch a few cents above face value, but an uncirculated example, especially in high mint state grades, could reach several dollars to hundreds, depending on the strike quality. Collectors particularly seek out examples with strong details on Lincoln's hair and beard, and with full original red color. Preserve it. In addition to regular issues, the 1957 wheat penny has varieties and errors that fascinate collectors: doubled dies, repunched mint marks, off-center strikes, and clipped planchets are just a few of the mistakes that sometimes left the mint and ended up in the hands of collectors. These error coins can be worth significantly more than their regular counterparts, in some cases hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on the severity and clarity of the error. The Denver Mint especially was known for producing large quantities of coins with repunched mint marks during the 1950s, making the 1957 D variety one to examine carefully under magnification. The cultural context of the 1957 wheat penny also adds to its charm. The cent circulated during a time when America was enjoying rock and roll, with Elvis Presley leading the charts. Automobiles like the Chevrolet Bel Air and Ford Fairlane symbolized the golden age of cars, and schoolchildren might have carried a 1957 penny to spend on candy, bubble gum, or a soda at the corner store. The coin was part of daily life for millions of Americans, weaving itself into memories and transactions both big and small. It is not just a piece of copper, but a silent witness to a decade of changes. We dive deeper. We also find that the 1957 penny stands at a symbolic crossroads of American coinage history. Within 2 short years, the wheat reverse would be retired, marking the end of an era that had lasted for 50 years, and ushering in the Lincoln Memorial design. In 1959, collectors often see 1957 pennies as transitional pieces, coins that marked the final breath of a beloved design before it gave way to a new chapter. From the metallurgical composition to the artistry of Brenner's design, from the mint's production challenges to the countless hands that carried these coins across gas stations, diners, schools, and factories, the 1957 wheat penny is much more than a cent. It is a story pressed into copper, a fragment of a nation's journey during the middle of the 20th century. When we look at these coins today, we are not just examining a relic of monetary history, we are connecting with the spirit of an America filled with ambition, optimism, and pride. This journey through the 1957 wheat penny is not just about numismatics, it is about history, culture, design, economics, and memory. And over the next 2 hours, we will explore its origins, its production, its varieties, its place in American society, and its enduring legacy among collectors today. So sit back as we uncover the full story of the 1957 wheat penny, a coin that carries the heartbeat of a nation in its copper shell. Imagine holding in your hand a simple copper coin that has traveled through the hands of farmers, workers, shopkeepers, and children for decades. A coin that looks ordinary yet tells a story of American history, economics, and survival. This is the story of the 1953 wheat penny, a coin that has captured the attention of collectors and history enthusiasts for generations. The wheat penny, minted in 1953, is part of the famous Lincoln cent series, which first appeared in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. The decision to place Lincoln on the cent was groundbreaking, as it was the first time a real historical figure rather than a symbolic image graced an American coin. The wheat reverse, featuring 2 simple stalks of wheat framing the denomination, became iconic and remained in use until 1958, when it was replaced by the Lincoln Memorial Jacinto. Understand the 1953 wheat penny. Place it in the context of its time. In 1953, the United States was emerging from the aftermath of World War II and entering the Cold War era. Dwight D. Eisenhower had just taken office as president, the Korean War had recently ended, and America was positioning itself as a global superpower. The economy was changing, suburban life was expanding, and industry was booming. In the midst of these historic changes, the U.S. Mint continued to produce billions of cents each year, meeting the needs of a rapidly growing population and a thriving economy. The 1953 wheat penny, therefore, is not just a coin, but a witness to a transformative period in American history. The 1953 Lincoln wheat cents were minted at 3 facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Each mint produced a substantial number of coins. Philadelphia produced the largest share with no mint mark. Denver coins carry the D mint mark, and San Francisco coins display the S mint mark. Each of these mint locations produced coins with their own subtle differences and minting quality. Philadelphia struck over 256 million coins, Denver more than 700 million, and San Francisco around 182 million. This means that while the 1953 wheat penny is not rare in circulation, there are countless varieties, conditions, and errors that make it highly collectible today. When it comes to composition, the 1953 wheat penny continues the standard of the era, consisting of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. This high copper content gives the coin its distinctive reddish hue when freshly minted, though over time these pennies often darken to a chocolate brown or even take on a greenish tone from oxidation. Collectors prize coins that have retained their original red luster, as these are far scarcer than those that have aged naturally. The metal content is also a reminder of a time before the rising cost of copper forced the U.S. Mint to change the composition in later decades. For collectors, the history of the 1953 wheat penny lies not only in the sheer number of coins struck, but also in the remarkable range of conditions, errors, and varieties that have surfaced. Among these are doubled dies, repunched mint marks, and off-center strikes. Some 1953 pennies show a strong doubling in the date or lettering, while others reveal the distinctive look of a repunched mint mark, especially from the Denver and San Francisco issues. Such varieties can elevate a coin worth only a few cents into one worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. In top condition, grading is another essential aspect of understanding the 1953 wheat penny. The Sheldon coin grading scale used by collectors ranges from poor to perfect mint state. A coin that is circulated with heavy wear might only be worth face value, while an uncirculated coin with blazing red surfaces can command significant premiums at auction. The difference between a brown coin, a red-brown coin, and a full red coin can mean the difference between a modest price and an impressive collector value. For the 1953 penny, in particular, gem uncirculated examples, especially with strong red coloration, are highly sought after. To trace the significance of this coin further, we must also explore its place in numismatic history. The wheat cent as a whole is one of the most collected U.S. coins of all time. Millions of people were drawn into coin collecting by searching for wheat pennies in circulation during the mid-20th century. The 1953 penny was one of the later issues in the series, and by this time, the design had already achieved legendary status in American households. Children kept penny boards to fill with dates and mint marks, and the hunt for rare or unusual cents became a beloved pastime. Thus, every 1953 penny connects to this broader cultural phenomenon of coin collecting in America by the minting details and collector value. The 1953 wheat penny also reflects deeper economic and cultural truths. Pennies were an essential part of daily commerce in the 1950s. They bought candy, newspapers, and small household items in a way that is hard to imagine today. When inflation has reduced their practical use, they also carried symbolic weight as reminders of Lincoln and the values he represented: honesty, unity, and sacrifice. This gave the humble cent a moral as well as monetary significance. As the years passed and the wheat penny design was retired in 1958, replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse, the 1953 penny became part of a closed chapter in American coinage. The end of the wheat design marked the close of nearly half a century of an iconic motif. The 1953 issue therefore stands as one of the final representatives of that era, a piece that bridges the earlier decades of the century with the modern age. Today, when collectors study the 1953 wheat penny, they see more than just copper. They see the reflection of a country in transition, the artistry of a coin that linked the people to their past, and the details of minting that open windows into the craftsmanship and technology of the U.S. Mint. The coin tells us about economics, culture, artistry, and national identity, and its journey through time adds layers of meaning that make even the most common example worth appreciating. Fascination with the 1953 wheat penny continues to grow because each coin holds its own story. A coin struck in Philadelphia may have circulated in the bustling streets of New York. A coin struck in Denver may have changed hands in a small farming town in the Midwest, and a coin struck in San Francisco may have been used in the busy ports of California. Each has a journey, each has wear patterns, scratches, and toning that silently testify to its travels through history. So, when we hold a 1953 wheat penny, we are holding more than metal. We are holding a fragment of history, a survivor from the past that carries with it the stories of millions of Americans. It is a reminder that even the smallest objects can be windows into our collective story, and that in every worn detail there lies a connection to the lives of those who came before us. This is why the 1953 wheat penny remains a coin worth studying, cherishing, and collecting, because it speaks not only of Lincoln, not only of the mint, not only of its copper, but of America itself in a time of growth, transition, and enduring values. Imagine holding in your hand a small copper coin from 1945 and realizing that this humble wheat penny is not just a piece of metal, but a time capsule that connects us directly to the final year of the Second World War, to the people who lived through it, and to the economy of a nation emerging victorious, yet scarred from one of the most defining moments in human history. The 1945 wheat penny is more than just a cent, is a witness to history, a survivor of wartime economics, and a lasting symbol of America's resilience and innovation. When you study this coin closely, you discover that every detail, from the metal it was made from to the design chosen for it, reflects larger forces at play, forces that shaped the United States during the mid-20th century. 1945 wheat penny belongs to the Lincoln Cent series, a design first introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and it was designed by Victor David Brenner, a sculptor, whose initials you can still see as VD on the coin if you look closely on the reverse in its earliest years. But in 1945, the coin still carried Brenner's classic portrait of Lincoln on the obverse and the iconic wheat ears on the reverse. These wheat ears were chosen to symbolize prosperity, growth, and America's agricultural strength at a time when the nation prided itself on being a land of opportunity and abundance. The choice of copper as the primary metal for the 1945 wheat penny was deeply tied to the events of the era. Earlier in 1943, the United States Mint had produced pennies out of zinc-coated steel because copper was desperately needed for the war effort, as copper was essential in producing shell casings, electrical wiring, and countless military supplies. But the steel cents of 1943 corroded easily and were not well received by the public. In 1944, the Mint made the decision to return to a copper alloy, but the source of that copper was remarkable. Much of it came from spent shell casings collected from military training grounds and battlefields, meaning that when you hold a 1945 wheat penny, you may very well be holding a coin that was once part of the very ammunition used by American soldiers during the war. This gives the 1945 penny not just monetary value, but emotional and historical significance, as it is literally forged from the material of conflict, transformed into a coin of peace. The production of the 1945 wheat penny was massive as the United States was booming with post-war economic energy. Over 1 billion wheat pennies were struck across 3 mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia Mint struck the most, with well over 1 billion coins bearing no mint mark, while Denver produced hundreds of millions marked with a small d beneath the date, and San Francisco struck its share as well, marked with an S. These mintage figures make the 1945 penny common in circulation, but rarity is not the only measure of significance. The sheer volume of production reflects the growth of commerce at the time, the rapid expansion of industry, and the rising consumer culture that would define post-war America. Design itself, while familiar, carried symbolic weight. In 1945, Abraham Lincoln on the obverse was not just a tribute to a past president, but also a reminder of unity, democracy, and freedom, themes that resonated powerfully as America celebrated victory in Europe and prepared for reconstruction efforts globally. The reverse design, with its 2 wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America, echoed ideals of abundance and shared prosperity, as the nation looked forward to peace and economic growth. Numismatists and collectors value the 1945 wheat penny not only for its common copper variety, but also for its fascinating errors and varieties, which can transform a simple 1-cent coin into something worth thousands. Examples include double die obverses and reverses repunched, mint marks and off-center strikes, which make these coins stand out in the world of collecting. Careful examination with magnification tools has revealed many of these varieties, and over the decades, the 1945 penny has become a favorite hunting ground for collectors who hope to find such rarities tucked away in old jars or family coin collections. To fully understand the 1945 wheat penny, you must place it in the broader context of American history. At that time, Franklin D. Roosevelt was still president when the year began, but by April 1945, Harry S. Truman had assumed office after Roosevelt's death and was leading the country through the final stages of the war. The atomic bomb would soon be dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan would surrender in August, and the Second World War would come to an end. All of this happened during the same year these coins were struck, so each penny minted in 1945 became a silent witness to one of the most dramatic years of the 20th century. Economically, the United States was shifting from a wartime footing to a peacetime economy. Millions of soldiers were returning home. The GI Bill was beginning to transform education, housing, and work opportunities for veterans, and consumer demand was soaring. This meant that coins like the 1945 wheat penny played a vital role in the everyday lives of Americans, buying bread, milk, newspapers, and countless essentials at a time when every penny truly mattered. In the decades since its release, the 1945 wheat penny has become a coin that collectors of all levels seek out. It is often one of the first wheat pennies that new collectors encounter because of its high mintage and availability, yet it continues to fascinate advanced collectors due to the variety's errors and the deeper story behind its production. It is both common and extraordinary, a coin that most people may overlook and change, but one that reveals a rich story when studied carefully. We think about value. The 1945 wheat penny in circulated condition is worth only a few cents more than its face value, but condition is everything in numismatics. Uncirculated examples, especially those with brilliant red luster preserved from the moment of minting, can fetch far higher prices on the collector market, with some high-grade mint-state specimens certified by grading companies selling for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. The presence of errors can drive values even higher, making this coin not just a historical object, but a potential treasure for those who know what to look for. Beyond its monetary value, the 1945 wheat penny invites us to reflect on the role of small everyday objects in preserving history. Every single coin is a messenger from the past, and the 1945 wheat penny is one of the clearest messengers of America's story of sacrifice, war, victory, and rebirth. In the middle of the 20th century, when you study this coin, you are studying not just copper alloy, but the ambitions, struggles, and triumphs of an entire generation. So, when you come across a 1945 wheat penny in a collection, a coin roll, or even in your change, remember that it is not just a coin. It is a story pressed into copper, a story of soldiers returning home, of families rebuilding their lives, of industries converting from weapons to consumer goods, of leaders making fateful decisions, of a nation stepping onto the world stage as a superpower, and of a people who believe that even the smallest cent mattered in building a better future. Imagine holding in your hand a small copper coin that at first glance looks like every other wheat penny ever minted. But when you look closer, you realize it carries one of the most fascinating and legendary stories in all of American numismatics. The wheat penny of 1955 is not just a coin. It is a gateway into one of the greatest minting blunders in United States history, a mistake so famous and so captivating that it transformed an ordinary cent into an icon of rarity, desire, and endless debate. Collectors across the decades have pursued it relentlessly. Dealers have told its story thousands of times, and historians have dissected every angle of how it came to be. But what is the real history behind the 1955 wheat penny? Why does this small piece of copper command such an important place in the world of coins? And what happened in that unforgettable year that gave rise to one of the most recognized errors in American coinage? To truly understand the story of the 1955 wheat penny, we must step back into the middle of the 20th century. The United States in 1955 was a country at the crossroads of tradition and transformation. Dwight D. Eisenhower was president. The Cold War was intensifying. The post-war economic boom was reshaping daily life, and the American public was seeing vast changes in culture, technology, and prosperity. In the middle of all of this, the United States Mint continued its daily work of striking billions of coins for commerce. Coins that were often overlooked in daily life, but which would one day tell the story of a nation. The wheat penny itself had been introduced in 1909 to honor the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Designed by Victor David Brenner, featured the iconic profile of Lincoln on the obverse and two stylized wheat stalks framing the denomination on the reverse. This design became one of the most beloved and enduring in United States history, running until 1958. By the time 1955 arrived, the Lincoln wheat cent was deeply familiar to Americans who used it constantly in daily transactions. From a candy bar to a bus ride to a newspaper, it was a coin of the P. Apply it within that ordinary year of 1955. Something extraordinary happened at the Philadelphia Mint as presses roared and dies clashed under pressure. A misalignment occurred during the hubbing process. The working dies responsible for striking cents were accidentally impressed twice, but not in perfect alignment. The result was a doubled die obverse where Lincoln's portrait looked correct, but the inscriptions on the obverse, "Liberty in God We Trust," and the date 1955 were boldly doubled. This was not a faint error. This was not a subtle doubling. This was dramatic, obvious, and unmistakable. Collectors would later call it one of the most striking double die errors ever produced in the history of American coinage. When the error coins were first released, they slipped unnoticed into circulation, mixed in with millions of normal cents. By the time the mistake was discovered, many had already entered the hands of the public. It is estimated that somewhere between 20,000 and 24,000 pieces were struck with this double die obverse, a tiny fraction compared to the hundreds of millions of cents minted in 1955, but enough to spark a wildfire in the collecting world. Once the error was recognized, the story spread quickly. Collectors scrambled to find the coin. Ordinary citizens checked their pocket change. Dealers advertised the new rarity, and demand skyrocketed. This was the birth of one of the most famous and accessible error coins ever known. Unlike many rarities which exist only in the hands of the wealthy elite, the 1955 double die wheat penny was affordable in its early years and could be found by sharp-eyed individuals in circulation. It became a symbol of the thrill of discovery, proving that treasure could still be hiding in your pocket. Decades past, the fame of the 1955 wheat penny only grew. It became the star of countless coin shows, auction catalogs, and reference books. It was featured in newspapers, magazines, and television programs. The coin was even used by some dealers as a promotional giveaway in starter coin sets. During the 1950s and 1960 seconds, a move that only deepened its reputation as a legendary piece of American numismatics. History of this coin also shines light on the minting process itself. The era reveals how dies were prepared, hubbed, and used, and how even the smallest misalignment could create a lasting legacy. The double die obverse of 1955 has been studied by generations of numismatists who analyze the strength of the doubling, the position of the letters, and the precise circumstances that created the anomaly. Every line of text, every doubled inscription tells us about the minting technology of its time. Over the years, the value of the 1955 double die wheat penny has climbed significantly, while millions of ordinary wheat cents from 1955 remain common. This particular error commands thousands of dollars depending on condition. Coins in higher mint state grades can fetch staggering sums at auction, while even heavily circulated examples are highly sought after by collectors. The combination of fame, accessibility, and dramatic appearance makes it one of the most enduring icons of the numismatic world. But beyond value, the 1955 wheat penny teaches us about history, about the dedication of collectors, and about the human Fascination with mistakes that turn into marvels. It is a coin that has appeared in countless collections, from beginners who dream of finding one to experts who cherish its legacy. It is both a piece of everyday commerce and a symbol of extraordinary fortune. Its story captures the very spirit of numismatics, the hunt, the history, and the human connection to objects of the past. As you listen to this journey unfolding, imagine the presses at the Philadelphia Mint hammering copper planchets in 1955. Imagine the workers who never realized that history was being made under their watch. Imagine the ordinary citizens who unknowingly spent these coins on candy or coffee, never dreaming that one day those cents would be worth hundreds or thousands. Imagine the excitement of the first collector who noticed the doubling and recognized the treasure hidden in plain sight. 1955 wheat penny stands as a legend, not because it was planned, but because it was a mistake that became history. A mistake that turned copper into gold in the imagination of collectors everywhere. Its story is not just about a coin, it is about the mystery of chance, the power of error, and the way a small copper cent can capture the hearts of generations. This is the tale of the 1955 wheat penny, and it is a story that still continues every time someone checks their change and dreams that maybe, just maybe, they will uncover one of the most famous treasures ever struck by the United States Mint. The year 1944 marked a pivotal moment in both world history and in the story of American coinage, and at the center of this period lies the fascinating 1944 Lincoln wheat penny, a coin that has captured the attention of collectors, historians, and everyday people who stumble across it in their change. This small copper coin tells a story far bigger than its size. It connects us to the tail end of World War II, to the resilience of the United States Mint, and to the remarkable changes in materials, minting practices, and economic pressures that shaped the coins in circulation at that time. To understand the significance of the 1944 wheat penny, we must step back to the early years of the Lincoln cent. First introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, this coin was revolutionary as it marked the first time a United States coin featured a real historical figure instead of classical imagery. The design, by Victor David Brenner, placed Lincoln's portrait proudly on the obverse, while the reverse displayed two simple stalks of wheat curving around the words 1 cent and United States of America. This wheat design would endure until 1958, becoming one of the most iconic motifs in American numismatics. By the time the United States entered the Second World War in December 1941, the Lincoln cent had already become deeply familiar to Americans, but war brought new challenges to coin production. The US Mint faced severe shortages in critical metals, including copper, which was essential for producing ammunition shell casings and electrical wiring to support the war effort. By 1943, the government ordered the mint to preserve copper for military use, leading to the creation of the famous 1943 steel cent struck on zinc-coated steel planchets. These coins were lighter, magnetic, and unlike anything the American public had ever handled. Though practical, they quickly proved unpopular as they rusted easily and were often mistaken for dimes. When 1944 arrived, the war was still raging, but copper supplies had stabilized somewhat, and the mint returned to producing cents in copper. Yet even this transition came with an intriguing twist. Instead of sourcing newly mined copper, the mint repurposed spent ammunition shell casings collected from military training grounds and battlefields across the country and overseas, melted down and rolled into sheets. This recycled metal became the raw material for the 1944 wheat cents, making them not only coins of commerce, but also silent witnesses to the recycling spirit and sacrifices of a nation at war. Each 1944 penny carries within it the remnants of wartime America, forged literally out of the debris of conflict. The 1944 wheat penny was struck at 3 mint facilities: the Philadelphia Mint with no mint mark, the Denver Mint with a small d mark below the date, and the San Francisco Mint with an S mark. Together these mints produced an astonishingly high mintage, over 1 billion coins in total, making 1944 one of the most common years in the wheat cent series. The Philadelphia Mint alone produced over 1 4 billion coins, a record at the time, and a clear reflection of the enormous demand for small change in a booming wartime economy, as millions of soldiers were paid in cash, and as workers filled factories producing goods for the war effort. But despite these high mintages, the 1944 cent remains fascinating to collectors because of its varieties, errors, and the unique circumstances of its creation. One of the most sought-after rarities is the 1944 steel cent, a mistake that occurred when leftover steel planchets from 1943 were accidentally fed into the presses in 1944. These transitional error coins are incredibly scarce, with only a handful known to exist today, and they sell for tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars at auction. Conversely, a few 1943 copper cents exist when copper planchets intended for 1942 were accidentally used a year later. Both the 1943 copper cent and the 1944 steel cent are legendary rarities considered among the holy grails of American numismatics. The standard 1944 copper wheat penny weighs 3.11 grams, is composed of 95% copper with a small balance of tin and zinc, and has a diameter of 19 millimeters. Its obverse features Abraham Lincoln with the inscriptions "In God We Trust, Liberty," and the date, while the reverse displays the iconic wheat ears design flanking the words 1 cent and United States of America with the pluribus unum at the top. The artistry of Brenner's design, combined with the wartime story behind the metal, gives this coin a presence far greater than its face value. When collectors evaluate the 1944 wheat penny, condition is everything. Coins that circulated heavily during the 1940s and 1952 often show considerable wear, with smooth surfaces, flattened wheat stalks, and faded lettering. These examples are common and can be found in coin shops or online for just a few cents above face value. However, high-grade specimens, especially those preserved in uncirculated condition or with brilliant red luster, are far scarcer and command strong premiums. Coins graded mint state 65 or higher with full red surfaces untouched by oxidation can sell for hundreds of dollars, and the most pristine examples certified at the top levels have reached thousands. The 1944D and 1944 South Mint marks add further layers of collectability. The Denver Mint struck over 430 million coins, while San Francisco struck over 282 million. Though both are plentiful in circulated grades, uncirculated survivors with sharp strikes and blazing color are avidly pursued. The mint mark especially tends to be weaker, and collectors value strong, clear examples. Certain error varieties add spice to the hunt, including doubled dies, repunched mint marks, and off-center strikes, all of which provide a glimpse into the hurried wartime production environment. The broader historical context also makes the 1944 penny compelling. In that year, the Allied forces launched the D-Day invasion, liberating France and pushing towards victory in Europe. At the same time, the Pacific theater saw intense battles in places like the Philippines. The war was demanding and costly, and every citizen was asked to contribute, from rationing goods to recycling scrap metal. Even children collected tin cans and copper wiring for the war effort, knowing that those materials might end up in the very coins they carried in their pockets. Thus, the 1944 wheat penny is more than just a numismatic object. It is a tangible artifact of sacrifice, resilience, and victory after the war ended. In 1945, the United States would undergo enormous economic growth, and the Lincoln wheat penny would remain a familiar companion in people's pockets until the design was retired in 1958, replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse. Yet the 1944 cent endures as one of the most symbolic issues in the series, beloved not only for its connection to history, but also for its place in everyday life. Millions of people born during or just after the war remember handling these coins as children, buying candy, newspapers, or bus fare. They are woven into the cultural fabric of mid-20th century America today. When someone stumbles upon a 1944 wheat penny, it may seem like just an old coin, but to those who know its story, it is a bridge to a time of global struggle, national unity, and the enduring values symbolized by the image of Abraham Lincoln himself. Imagine holding in your hand a small copper coin struck nearly 90 years ago. A coin that passed through the Great Depression. A coin that was used when Franklin D. Roosevelt was president. A coin that saw America rising from hardship into a new era of industry power and resilience. This is the 1936 Lincoln Wheat Penny, a simple 1-cent piece that carries with it layers of history, politics, economics, art, and human stories. Today, we are going to take a long, deep dive into this coin, a professional, detailed history that will carry us through the very reasons why this coin was struck, how it was designed, what its legacy is, and why collectors even now search for it with passion and reverence. Wheat penny had already become a symbol of modern American coinage when the United States Mint introduced it in 1909 to celebrate the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth. By 1936, it had been circulating for nearly 3 decades, and Americans had grown accustomed to seeing the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the 2 wheat stalks on the reverse. Yet the 1936 issue stands at a turning point in American history. To understand why, we need to journey back to the conditions of the mid-1930s, a time when America was fighting to emerge from the Great Depression. Unemployment was high, farms were struggling, industry was trying to restart, and the New Deal programs were reshaping the landscape of American society. United States Mint in 1936 was busier than it had been in the early 1930s, during the worst Depression years when coin demand had collapsed as commerce slowed. But by 1936, economic recovery programs had started to restore business activity and coinage needs surged once again. This was the environment in which the 1936 wheat penny was produced at 3 different mints: the main Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint. Each of these facilities played a critical role in making sure coins reached every corner of the nation. And as we examine their production totals, we find fascinating stories. Philadelphia struck over 309 million pieces, Denver produced nearly 41 million, and San Francisco added more than 29 million in the total mintage for 1936, one of the largest of the decadano. The year 1936 is also notable because it was one of the first years when proof coins returned to American numismatics. Proofs are special coins struck with extra care, polished dies, and mirror-like finishes, and they were sold to collectors in limited numbers. After a long pause since 1916, the Mint resumed proof coinage in 1936, and among them was the 1936 proof Lincoln cent. This makes the year even more historic because the proof sets of 1936 are treasured today as the rebirth of modern proof coinage. The proof 1936 wheat penny in particular is one of the most desirable coins a collector can acquire because it represents both artistry and scarcity. Artistry of the wheat penny itself had not changed since its introduction in 1909. The portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner, remained the longest-running portrait in American coinage history, and the reverse, with its simple wheat stalks symbolizing American agriculture, continued to remind citizens of the nation's roots and farming communities. But by 1936, Brenner's design had become more than just art. It was an icon. It symbolized stability in uncertain times. Lincoln's steady gaze reminded Americans of endurance, unity, and sacrifice. The coin was not just money. It was a message carried in every pocket. If we examine the composition of the coin, we see that it was struck in bronze, consisting of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. This traditional alloy gave the coin its rich reddish appearance, though circulation would quickly darken its color. Collectors today prize examples that still retain their original red luster. Finding a fully red 1936 penny untouched by time is considered a gem of the hobby and can fetch significant prices in auctions, particularly in the highest mint state grades. The 1936 wheat penny also stands out because it exists in several varieties that intrigue collectors. For example, the 1936 double die obverse is one of the most famous varieties from this year, where extra impressions of the design can be seen on the date and lettering due to a misalignment during the die making process. These double die cents are scarce and highly valuable, commanding prices that can turn a simple 1-cent piece into a treasure worth hundreds. or even thousands of dollars, depending on condition. This variety adds a layer of mystery and excitement to the 1936 series, because it reminds us that, even with modern machinery, mistakes could still happen, and those mistakes became prizes for future generations. But beyond the technical details of mintages, alloys, designs, and varieties, the 1936 wheat penny represents something larger. It represents the spirit of a nation. Recovering from hard times, people used these pennies to buy bread, newspapers, coffee, and transit fares. Children saved them in piggy banks and coin purses. Mothers counted them carefully for groceries, and fathers held them tightly during tough paydays. Each coin carried the weight of survival dreams and small victories in an America determined to rise once more. In 1936, Jesse Owens was winning Olympic gold in Berlin, defying Nazi ideology. Franklin Roosevelt was running for re-election with his New Deal message, and the Dust Bowl was still ravaging parts of the Midwest. Through it all, the humble wheat penny circulated daily, silently witnessing the struggles and triumphs of ordinary people. Collectors today look back at the 1936 penny not just as a numismatic item, but as a time capsule of that pivotal year. The proof coins show us the artistry and care of the mint. The regular circulation strikes show us the demand for commerce, and the varieties show us the unpredictability of minting technology. Together, they paint a full picture of why this coin is remembered, and why entire books and countless studies have been written about wheat pennies and their enduring place in history. So, when you hold a 1936 Lincoln wheat penny, you are not just holding copper, you are holding the echoes of the Depression, the hopes of recovery, the steady leadership of Lincoln's image, the artistry of Victor David Brenner, and the story of America in transition from hardship to hope, from scarcity to progress, from doubt to determination. That is why this coin deserves more than just a glance. It deserves the kind of deep exploration that numismatists, historians, and collectors have pursued for decades, and why we can spend hours unfolding its story in every detail. In the world of American coinage, few coins captured the imagination of collectors, historians, and everyday people like the humble wheat penny. And when we turn our attention to the year 1954, we uncover a fascinating chapter of numismatic history that stretches far beyond the copper coin itself. The 1954 wheat penny represents a post-war America, a society transitioning from the challenges of World War II into the prosperity of the 1950s. And every detail of this coin, from its design to its circulation to the stories it carried in pockets, purses, and cash registers, tells us something about that era. When we speak about the 1954 wheat penny, we are not just talking about a small copper coin struck at the United States Mint. We are looking into a time capsule that holds within it the economic conditions, the artistic ideals, the minting technology, and the spirit of a nation finding its place on the world stage. In the mid-20th century, the obverse of the wheat penny, of course, bears the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner, first appearing in 1909 to celebrate the centennial of Lincoln's birth. This design remained unchanged for decades, becoming one of the most enduring and iconic images on American coinage. Brenner's initials, which had been controversial upon the coin's release, had returned to the design in 1918, appearing at the base of Lincoln's shoulder, and by 1954, this portrait had become almost sacred, a reminder of Lincoln's role in preserving the Union and ending slavery to millions of Americans. The reverse of the coin retained its classic wheat ears design, symbolizing agricultural abundance and national strength. By 1954, the wheat reverse had already been in use for 45 years and was nearing the end of its run, before being replaced in 1959 by the Lincoln Memorial Reverse to mark Lincoln's 150th birthday. This gives the 1954 wheat penny an additional layer of historical importance, as it belongs to the final decade of the wheat cent series and serves as one of the last links to Brenner's original vision. The production of the 1954 wheat penny took place at 3 facilities: the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint. Each Contributing to the total mintage of that year, Philadelphia produced the bulk of the coins with no mint mark, as was customary. Denver struck coins marked with a small d beneath the date, and San Francisco contributed its own mint mark issues, although in reduced numbers compared to earlier years. This tri-mint production gives collectors a variety of 1954 wheat pennies to study and pursue, each with its own scarcity profile and strike quality. The economic climate of 1954 adds another layer of context. The United States was experiencing a period of post-war growth. Suburbanization was spreading across the country, car ownership was becoming more common, television sets were transforming living rooms, and the economy was expanding. Yet inflation, concerns and debates about monetary policy still touched ordinary citizens in their daily lives. A penny in 1954 carried more purchasing power than it does today. A single cent could buy a stick of gum or contribute meaningfully toward a child's allowance, making the wheat penny an active participant in the daily economy. The minting process itself was a blend of artistry and industrial power. The planchets were prepared from copper alloy, which by 1954 had stabilized at 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. Following the temporary wartime change to steel cents in 1943, the presses struck millions upon millions of these coins, each one carrying the proud image of Lincoln into the hands of the American public. Quality control, however, was not perfect, and this has given us fascinating error coins and varieties from 1954. Off-center strikes, doubled dies, repunched mint marks, and die cracks have all been documented, and these minting anomalies transform what was once a routine cent into a collectible treasure. Some of these varieties can command significant premiums in the numismatic market, especially those with strong doubling on the date or mint mark. Collectors have long prized the 1954 wheat penny in particular. Since San Francisco mintages were relatively modest by the mid-1950s, the San Francisco Mint was nearing the end of its role in striking cents, halting cent production entirely after 1955. This makes the 1954 not only a collectible coin in its own right, but also a historical artifact of a minting era that was about to close. Enthusiasts of the Lincoln cent often note that coins from San Francisco carry a unique charm, perhaps due to their lower mintages and the way they circulated less widely across the country compared to the Philadelphia and Denver issues. When we study the 1954 wheat penny, we also uncover personal stories. This was a coin that might have jingled in the pocket of a factory worker in Detroit or been dropped into the till of a soda fountain in New York. It may have been saved by a child starting a coin collection inspired by the booming interest in hobbyist coin collecting during the 1950s. Fueled by coin boards and numismatic magazines. Every 1954 penny could have been part of someone's daily life, each one a witness to the culture and commerce of its time. Beyond the minting numbers and design details, the 1954 wheat penny also reflects broader themes in American history. The Cold War was intensifying in the mid-1950s. The United States was asserting itself globally, while domestically it was grappling with issues of civil rights, prosperity, and cultural change. And through it all, the Lincoln cent quietly circulated as both money and symbol, representing stability in a time of transition. Collectors today who seek out the 1954 wheat penny are not just chasing a piece of copper, they are reaching back into history, trying to hold in their hands the essence of mid-century America. Some pursue high-grade examples certified by professional grading services, where the details of Lincoln's hair and the wheat stalks remain crisp. Others chase rare error varieties or simply enjoy building complete date and mint mark sets. Each 1954 penny, whether brilliant, uncirculated, or heavily worn, carries its own journey and story that makes it unique. When we dive deep into the 1954 wheat penny, we open doors into art history, economics, minting technology, cultural values, and even personal nostalgia. This coin has the power to teach us about the United States Mint, the decisions of engravers and treasury officials, and the way everyday money reflects national identity. For a numismatist or historian, a coin, the 1954 wheat penny, is not just an object. It is a portal to a world of meaning. And the more we look, the more we discover. And so, the story of the 1954 wheat penny is not only the story of a coin, but the story of a nation in motion, standing at the crossroads of tradition and change. And it is this depth, this richness, and this connection to both the past and present that ensures the wheat penny of 1954 will always command fascination among collectors, historians, and all who value the history written in metal and memory.